Um, Welcome and thank you for coming to our presentation about the ERB at the Lycée. We decided to put this together just to clarify how to interpret the scores that you've received in the mail and how we as a school and program use them. First of all, a lot of parents wonder, what is the ERB? And it stands for Educational Records Bureau. And from their site, I simply took this down. It's a not-for-profit educational service organization providing achievement assessments for pre-K through grade 12 to over 2,000 independent, faith-based, and select public schools worldwide. The test that we take in the ERB is the CTP, which is the Comprehensive Testing Program. And this is a rigorous assessment for high-achieving students in areas such as reading, listening, vocabulary, writing, science, and mathematics. To start off, I want to clarify that the ERB is a low-stakes test. So this is kind of what the ERB is not used for. Because we know as teachers, what you know as parents, that a test that takes place over 1 week just provides a snapshot of a day or a week in the life of a child. And as we give these tests, we actually will take down notes. If we notice that your daughter came in from recess and had a fight with her best friend, or if somebody ended up going home early because they were feeling sick, we'll write that down so that we can keep that in mind when we see the results, because they can vary greatly just depending on little day-to-day changes in life. Because of this, we're looking for broad trends. We're not using this for decisions regarding advancement from grade to grade, deciding who's going up to the next grade or not. They're not used for your report card grades. Your child's teachers actually use many forms of assessment in deciding those things, including in-class work, participation, homework, observations, one-on-one instruction, projects, and tests. So why do we use the ERB tests? These tests allow us to look at our school and compare how our students are performing compared to other norm groups. And a norm group, we have 3 that we compare to. The national norm has a mixed demographic base of 50 to 60,000 scores, and they look at them over the past 3 years. Independent school norm is based on 12 to 1,300 schools with screened admissions, a select student body, which changes the expectations of those schools, and no Catholic schools are included as part of the definition. And just for the past 2 years, we've been able to compare our school to the FRAS group, which includes approximately 20 French-American schools in the United States. So this helps us track how our school is doing in comparison to other programs. It also gives us information to track how each student is doing year to year. It provides an instrument for instructional planning, so we can decide if a certain class needs more focus in one area than another, or if a certain student needs more support in certain areas. It helps us diagnose strengths and weaknesses in specific skill areas for entire classes or individual students. It helps us evaluate the efficacy of our English instruction. We chose this evaluation because it does match our English curriculum closely, and it's used by the majority of highly ranked independent schools. So this is a quick diagram to kind of explain the language that you'll see on the test scores that you receive. To start out, you have the percentile rank, and the percentile rank shows your students standing compared to everyone in the norm group over the past 3 years, and it's based on a scale of 1 to 99. If your child scores 65, it means that they scored better or as well as 65 other students, and less well than 34%. So it's placing them in that way. And the percentile is then translated into a stay 9, and it gives a little bit of a simpler view. The stay nines are a score from 1 to 9, and 5 is the midpoint. And stay nines are derived by dividing the entire range of scores into 9 segments. So being in stay 9 1 through 3 is the 1st through the 22nd percentile. That is lower than average. 4 to 6 is average in the 23rd to 76th percentiles, and 7 to 9 is above average in the 77th through 99th percentile. And what's important to remember here is that these are percentiles, so they're based not on how many questions they got right, but really in that group where they fell. Then when you look at the bar chart, this is really the great visual point, because you can see your diamonds are where your student fell, and this is actually marking how many of the questions they got right. So based from 0%, none correct, to 100%, all correct, you can see where they landed. Student percent mastery shows the percentage of correct responses. So to give you an idea, a segment of the test might just have 10 questions. So if they got 8 of those correct, they will have an 80%. The bar chart shows the norm group. And so the norm group that we use here is the independent schools, which is the most competitive group. And the norm chart will show you, on average, how many answers students in that norm group got correctly. So it just gives you a way to quickly evaluate where your student falls compared to other students in independent schools, which are generally all English programs. A quick description of the tests that was sent out with the results, just so that you know what each area actually involves. Verbal reasoning is the ability to analyze information and draw logical inferences, to recognize analogical verbal relationships, and to recognize verbal categorical attributes. In normal English, this means playing word games, doing things like analogies, groupings, categorizations, being able to find connections between words. And it's highly dependent on vocabulary. Auditory comprehension is being able to listen to a text without having a visual, and then respond to questions based on that text, just from what you remember hearing. And this one is only tested in 4th grade, and and in this test you cannot repeat. The teacher cannot repeat anything. It's all based on what they have understood from the first and only time that they've heard the text. Vocabulary is based on recognition and understanding of a wide range of vocabulary and using the context clues. Reading comprehension is reading a text and being able to answer different kinds of questions on that text that not only include answering specific literal recall questions, but going into analysis, inference, and higher level comprehension strategies. Writing mechanics is everything that is editing, spelling, capitalization, punctuation, the details of writing, where writing concepts and skills is more about the elegance of writing, the style of writing in which they decide what is the best way to say something or what is the most colorful way to express an idea. Mathematics is a conceptual understanding of math, application of the math skills to answer questions or solve problems. And quantitative reasoning, much like verbal reasoning, it's kind of the idea of number games, math games, being able to do comparisons and figure out the relationships to solve a problem when it's not clearly stated. And Algebra 1, this is only tested in the secondary level. Have an emphasis on problem solving and operations with variables, equations, and algebraic geometry. So these are actual scores that show the progress of our students results from year to year. So what this one shows is grade 4, and our school is green. Blue is suburban and public schools, and yellow is the independent English-only schools. The French schools are not included on this chart. And so what you see is in grade 4, a natural effect of having only 6 hours a week of English time. Verbal reasoning is generally a little bit lower, but we see that we're not very far off. And then as the grades go up, we see the green bar keeps going up until 8th grade. We are almost usually right with the independent schools and sometimes above. And this actually reflects what we've seen over the past 17 plus years of doing the ERBs. This is a trend that we have seen over time. And it also reflects the basics of bilingual learning theories, that the beginning skill acquisition can be a little bit slower, but as time passes, skills from both languages begin to transfer and scores start to surpass those of monolingual students. Now, this is kind of comparing apples to oranges. We have each different grade level compared. The next array of slides shows one group of students over the past 3 years. So you can see how that group advanced over 3 years. So this is the verbal reasoning test, and we picked the 8th grade slide because we have the most information for them. And again, our school is in green. The blue triangle is the suburban norm, so big city schools, and yellow square is the independent schools. And as you see, 2013, 2014, 2015, our green diamond is moving steadily up and achieving the same scores eventually as the independent schools. In vocabulary, you see the same trend. Reading comprehension, writing mechanics, mathematics, and quantitative reasoning. So we only take the ERB tests through the 8th grade. And beyond that, the students are taking other tests in French and in English. But beyond the 8th grade and the ERBs, we see that these trends continue. And so this was simply from the FeedInfo in 2015, the reporting of our scores for the SATs. And as you can see, compared to the national mean and the California mean, we exceeded we excelled in our scores. And also looking at different types of schools, public, independent, and California independent, our scores ended up surpassing those of the other programs. So at this point, just the key points that we want parents to know is, first of all, please do not worry or stress your children out about the tests or the scores. They are one data point that we use in a bigger global sense, but it's not a definition of your child. The Lycée uses ERB tests as a tool to evaluate and improve our English instruction. Limited English instructional time naturally affects ERB results in earlier grades. Keep your child's scores year to year so that you can compare their progress, and so that you also can identify any areas of strength or weakness that you want to address with the teacher. Ask your child's teacher if you think something seems irregular or concerning. This goes back to when I said it might have been a day that your child went home sick or something happened, and if you notice something seems odd, we can go back and look and see if there is an irregularity or if there is actually something that we need to address. And the last point is that our results over the past 17 plus years have shown that the program is highly effective, but it's a long-term program. It doesn't happen right off the bat. So at this point, I would be happy to answer any questions that you have about the test, and Let's see. I think I will just close that. There we go. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I remember this year they were pretty early in the school year. Is that the same for 8th grade?
Well, we have, I think usually we have taken them in January or February. Last year, we tried taking them earlier in November. Mm-hmm. And it's just a matter of where we can find a slot and when the times fit. We haven't really had a chance to delve further into if there is a reason for us to choose one over the other. They both, different times have different benefits. Earlier helps us address more and plan for that school year, while later gives us a chance to see what has been taught and then plan for the following school year. So at this point, it's probably going to be staying in that January, February timeline. Mm-hmm. And that is the cutoff point. I think March is the cutoff point. You can't take them later than that.
I'll add, because I'm here from the Ortega campus, that we will probably continue a fall testing at Ortega. It just seems to be a better window for us. We have a lot of things that come up. You guys have a lot of field trips in the fall. I think ours tend to be more January, February, and so we want to have it fun. This year we did it toward the end of November just because of Thanksgiving. And we found that time and it moved really well.
So something that, as a department, we would like to address and get more. So
equally, our kids are older and can do the majority of the testing in a single day. So they do all the verbal sections in a day, and then we do the math kind of a little bit later.
And yes, with the younger students, we try and just have 1 or 2 tests a day just in the mornings, so they aren't burnt out as the day goes by.
So we're here for the 4th grade? Because did the 3rd grade take a test?
The 3rd grade did not take the test
This year?
No. Last year they took it, and this year we decided to just have the 4th through the 8th grades take the test. Yes. Yes.
Does the fact that they have a U.S. math class and not a French math class, does that affect also in the same way the bilingual issue affects the score?
Well, originally, the development of the U.S. math course was based on the fact that we were seeing very low scores in our math, because the American math system and the way of teaching math is very different from the French system. And the big problem that we see is very different concepts will be introduced at vastly different times. And so where American students will start working on fractions in 1st grade, French students will start working on them on 4th grade. And so our U.S. math program is kind of a compromise to help give the students access to a little bit of that information and exposure to it, and the different styles of writing symbols and working out the problems, so that, and the vocabulary, so that when they see these tests, it's not foreign to them. However, it's, on 1 hour a week, you definitely do still see that effect, but ever since the math program started, we have seen a big change in the math scores on the ERBs.
It was really interesting to see how the scores started to converge later.
Once they get to the point where they can really transfer the knowledge that they've learned in both languages, it has an incredible effect on how they can really start
We really
skyrocketing.
see it a lot in the middle school years, where the 6th graders are so solid by the time they're We also did a pilot this year with U.S. Math at Ortega, and we did not have a separate U.S. Math class in Cesium, because we have 2 teachers who've been with us for long enough. Actually, I call my advanced English students, who are French math teachers, who worked with me on my U.S. math curriculum, took it over and integrated it into their program. And I didn't see any difference in that group of scores versus prior years. So we're going to continue that for 7th grade and do 6th and 7th grade that way next year. And if we can get all of our French math curriculum to include some of these other concepts that are more commonly found at different places, we may have like succeeded in not doing US math, at least at the secondary school.
Well, it's interesting because I talked to someone at Case, and her child, so they have a half Chinese program and a half English program, and her child is not connected to Chinese culture at all familially, like both parents are not, they don't speak at home. And the mathematics was soaringly high at Case because of something internal to the language. I mean, it's, you know, in French you've got like catch and set, you know, you have to learn
the algebra
words.
of counting.
Whereas everything in Chinese is base 10, all the numbers are super logical.
Yes.
So the kids did really well on that, but they're actually having trouble with English because it's the same reason that kids aren't as exposed to it.
Yes.
But they're closer to it than
Yes.
French kids. I mean, French kids are closer because it's a Romanized language, so
Yes.
it's interesting.
It's
just a fascinating.
very fascinating to see. But we wanted to take the mystery out of it and make it much less stressful for parents and especially for students, because these are in no way meant to make our kids panic. We want them to feel good about it.
When you say independent schools, I mean, they seem to be
Higher, yes.
higher. Are those private, or is it, what do
A
you mean
lot
by
of them are
independent
private.
schools?
Independent means they're not public schools. So they could be charter or they could be
Charter.
they could be private. And this definition excludes the Catholic schools, so it could be other religious schools, but they're, yeah. And in general, they are all English schools.
Do you know what other schools, like Hamlin or Burke?
All the English schools that
Yeah.
I see.
They all give the
They're all
ERB.
taking, and they have some of them.
A couple have given,
policies.
a couple have shifted away from the ERB and have created their own way of monitoring student progress internally, but the majority of what you think of as a high-end independent school is, at least in California, is giving ERB. I would add that many of those schools use the ERB as an admissions tool. The ERB level testing goes all the way down to pre-K, and whether or not you get into SFDA may very well depend upon your ERB scores when they evaluate an applicant's package. We don't admit in that same way. We don't use a standardized test as part of our admissions process here.
So is it more a tool for parents or for teachers?
It's, I think
I mean,
for
we have-
teachers, it's definitely something that we're trained to use and we use as a team and we look at together. For parents, it is a good tool to keep an eye on and to use in discussions with your teachers. And if you notice anything that is standing out to you, you can talk to your teacher about ways to address those. But
my question is more like, we have 3 meetings with you guys, and
yes.
and plus you guys give some kind of scorecard or
The report cards,
report
they
card,
get done,
which is, talk more to us than ERB, which is, as we said, a snapshot.
Exactly.
Which once last year was in November, this year it's in February or something.
Yes.
So it's more for you guys to evaluate children.
Exact, and not just children, but also the program and the
Yeah, the
classes
program
and the
and the
teaching.
school.
And it's really, yes,
And
it's,
so I think some
tool for
parents
us.
also would, if you guys could split the parents that are, both parents are French, and when one parent is, American and French, that because I'm sure you would see a bigger discrepancy. If you had the green dot like in French parents and mixed parents, wouldn't you see that?
possibly. I couldn't say that that's actually a trend that we've noticed across the board. Through the years, we see that it really is independent child to child, that there are
I'm sure.
that there are children who are fully French speaking at home, but have another thing that we haven't talked about is there are just people who are good at the strategies of taking tests, and especially this kind of test. And then people who get very nervous or scared. And so one of the reasons that we do start in 4th grade and have them do these is so that by the time they're in 9th, 10th, 11th grade and beyond, because these kinds of tests are omnipresent in America, they've developed these strategies, they've developed an ease with this kind of test when it becomes more important. So a lot of what they're coming to terms with is the experience of taking this kind of test and not getting panicked, not being overwhelmed. And so there will be students who will have wonderful grades and have great project scores who will do poorly on the tests because we will have noticed that they were incredibly nervous during the test. And so it's just a data point, but it helps us looking at broad trends, see where we need to focus more, where we...
Yeah, coming back to my question, I think
Yes.
there are some parents who are, when they are both French, they are worried that, you know, the kids might not reach or should not stay at the lycée all the way to terminal or whatever because they will be lacking practice in English. Question.
I think,
And why didn't you guys do it in 3rd grade? Because this year.
I think we decided that we really weren't getting data points that were that useful to our instruction at that young an age. I think that was a decision that we kind of came to last year.
It's also
Every school does it differently. I know French American, for instance, only does it every 2 years. They don't feel the need for every year's practice. So it's really up to the school, the teaching team.
I know, it's just because you guys did it last year.
We used to go as far as 10th grade, and several years ago we stopped doing that. So we find that this middle ground gives us some nice trend data.
gives them more time as well to focus on their skills instead of focusing on test-taking strategies all through January. And
It's lost instruction time if they're taking a test. But I think what we like about the test is it's challenging. And kids come away from the test and go, there was this problem, and they describe it, and how should I be thinking about that? And so to me, that's a sign of a good test if it's getting the kids' curiosity.
We try to balance between pushing too early, something that we know can be stressful, and then at the same time giving them that experience. And I think, from what we had seen with 3rd grade, that it wasn't really worth the time lost for the kids and the stress that we had seen before.
We did add some testing, I'll add, this year. At the secondary school, we did algebra for the first time with our 8th graders. We were blown away by how they tested.
All right, well,
Thank you.
I think
Thank
there are
you.
no other questions. Thank you for coming, and I hope this has clarified some things for you.
Thank you.
Bye.